You ever found out the people you trusted were the ones quietly destroying you? I did. Inside a freezing office archive under a flickering light, I saw everything: my boyfriend, my HR manager, their messages, their lies. And that day, I didn't cry. I planned, because sometimes revenge doesn't scream, it signs documents. My name is Alana. I'm 29 years old, and this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. The archive room was colder than anywhere else in the building, a kind of chill that bit through the air vents even in summer. It always smelled like time had paused there, dust thick enough to taste, printer ink that never quite faded, and the faint paper rot of forgotten reports. The bulb overhead buzzed and flickered, throwing light that shook like a dying heartbeat over rows of boxes and folders that leaned together like tired walls. I crouched low on the tile floor, balancing on one knee, searching through a stack of files that should have been turned in weeks ago. A simple contract renewal, one that somehow HR had misplaced. Again, that morning I wasn't angry. Anger was an energy I'd burned through long ago. What I felt was something duller: exhaustion wrapped in quiet disbelief. 4 promotion cycles, 4 years of hearing the same sentence in 4 slightly different tones. Not yet, Alana. I'd met every target, exceeded some trained people who now supervised me. Each evaluation ended with a smile that told me they had already decided my fate before I even walked in. My coffee cup, half full, waited on a box beside me, its heat long gone. It was from the corner cafe near North Lamar, the one that smelled like caramel and sounded like jazz on bad speakers. I always ordered it the same way: black, no sugar, because bitterness was predictable when nothing else was. I took one sip that morning and set it aside to cool, promising myself I'd drink it when I finished the file. I never did. The hallway outside was usually quiet at that hour. Most of the office hadn't arrived yet. The air conditioning hummed. Somewhere down the corridor, a copier stuttered to life and died again. Then, beneath it, I heard footsteps, steady, deliberate, neither rushed nor slow. The kind of walk that said someone didn't want to be heard, but also didn't care enough to truly hide. They stopped right outside the door. My fingers froze mid-page. My spine went straight. The bulb above flickered again, and in that pulse of light, I could see dust floating in the air like ash. Then came the whispers. 2 voices. One, low, clipped, almost nervous. The other, a soft laugh that scraped at something deep in me. Her, Catherine, HR manager, the queen of polite sabotage. She had a smile that stayed too long and eyes that never blinked when you told her something personal. She was the kind of woman who said, "We'll look into it," while already deleting the request from her inbox. I didn't move. I barely breathed. And then another voice joined hers. Eli, my boyfriend. Or the man I had believed was my boyfriend until that moment. Hearing his voice there, here, in the office where we both worked, was like being dunked in ice water. He said her name like it was something sweet, something he tasted before speaking. She whispered back, low and quick, about next time and close calls. The rest blurred into a rhythm of laughter and breath. The air thickened around me, heavy as wet cloth. Every muscle in my legs wanted to run, but none obeyed. I could feel my pulse hammering against the base of my throat, the kind that hurts because it's louder than your thoughts. Then silence. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. I leaned toward the door and peered through the small crack between the frame and the hinge. Eli stood just outside, alone now, phone glowing blue against his hand. He was texting, his mouth curved into a half smile, the same one he'd worn the night before in my apartment while stirring pasta sauce, the one he gave me after saying, "Don't worry, baby, things will work out." He had looked at me like I was safe, like he meant it. Now he wore that same expression, only directed at someone else. He turned and walked down the corridor. I watched his reflection fade across the polished floor tiles until only the sound of his footsteps remained. Then those, too, disappeared. I counted again. 10 seconds. 15. 20. The building seemed to exhale. Only then did I stand. My knees cracked softly in the silence. I brushed dust from my skirt and stepped out of the shadow of the shelf. That's when I saw it, his office tablet left on the corner of the scanner. Still lit, still unlocked. I hesitated for one heartbeat. My reflection wavered in the glass screen. My hands didn't shake, though they should have. They felt detached, almost mechanical, as if my body already knew what it had to do. I reached out and tapped the screen. A message preview glowed at the top. Catherine. The heart felt like mockery. I opened it. My breath shortened. The chat history scrolled upward, page after page. Flirty messages, inside jokes about the way I dressed, how my work blazers look like armor, comments about how Alana never knows when to let go of a task, pictures from last year's holiday party, ones I'd never seen before, angles that caught me mid-laugh while they exchanged emojis behind the camera. Then a line that froze me. Did you stall her request? Yup. Buried it behind payroll stuff. She won't even ask again. My throat went dry. Another line. I told Johnson she's not leadership material. He believed it? Of course. He trusts me. The words blurred. The screen's light flickered against my face as if even the tablet felt guilty showing them. The bulb above buzzed louder, casting everything in a pale, feverish glow. I should have cried. It would have been natural. Expected. But tears felt irrelevant, too fragile for what was happening. Instead, I felt a strange calm sliding in, cold and sharp like the air in that room. Without thinking, I opened the tablet's file manager. Years of shared documents, logs, cloud backups, even the deleted message cache he never cleared. I moved like someone who had done this before, though I never had. My fingers traced through folders, renaming copies, forwarding them to my email. Every timestamp, every screenshot, every digital breadcrumb that proved what they'd done. It wasn't just about betrayal, it was evidence. Somewhere between one email and the next, I realized I was breathing evenly again. My heartbeat had steadied. That terrified me more than the messages themselves. I stared at the screen, at my own name, mentioned between jokes and gossip, between two people who thought I'd never see it. Too intense, she'd called me. Not leadership material, he'd said. The kind of words that, in an office like ours, stuck to you like a stain. I pressed send. The files flew out to my private address, each one a quiet detonation waiting to happen. The sound of the email whoosh felt louder than anything else in that room. Then I stood there for a long time, listening to the hum of the lights, the muted echo of the city outside the windowless walls. I could confront them. I could march into Catherine's office, throw the tablet on her desk, watch her expression falter for the first time in her career. I could face Eli, ask him if it was worth it, ruining us for someone who used people like stepping stones. But I didn't, because people like them don't crumble when you scream. They don't break when you accuse. They watch, they calculate, and then they turn your outrage into proof that you're unstable. No, they only panic when you go quiet, when you become a mirror that doesn't blink. So I went quiet. I powered off the tablet, set it exactly where it had been, and straightened the folder I'd been searching for as if nothing had happened. I picked up my cold coffee, took one bitter sip, and walked back into the hallway. The morning light from the main office windows poured in, warm and golden, indifferent to everything it touched. Around me, phones rang, keyboards clicked, and the normal rhythm of another corporate day began again. No one noticed the change in me. Not yet. I smiled at the receptionist when she looked up, the same polite smile as always. I nodded to a coworker passing by with a stack of reports. On the outside, nothing had shifted. Inside, though, every line of my life had redrawn itself. I reached my desk, opened my laptop, and started typing an email titled Performance Review Documentation. Just 3 words that meant nothing to anyone but me. The first move of many. That was the morning they thought I walked away empty-handed. They were wrong. I walked out of that archive room carrying every secret they thought was safe. Every whisper they believed dissolved into thin air. And for the first time in years, I wasn't exhausted. I was awake. I didn't go home that night. I walked. Past the office towers on Congress Avenue where glass walls reflected 100 versions of myself. Past the glow of bars where laughter spilled onto the sidewalks. Past the smell of burnt oil and street tacos and late-night music bleeding through half-open doors. I walked until my heels clicked out of rhythm and my reflection disappeared into the darker parts of the city. The noise softened behind me, replaced by the low rush of cars from the interstate and the hum of the night itself. I needed distance, space between the person I'd been that morning and whoever I had become by evening. Every step felt like erasing a version of me that had believed in fairness. By the time I reached my car, the skyline shimmered like a mirage. I sat inside for almost an hour before touching the ignition. The air smelled faintly of dust and hand sanitizer. Streetlights blinked through the windshield, breaking the dark into restless fragments. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the steering wheel, listening to the ghost of their voices loop in my head like bad radio static. She's too emotional for leadership. Her resume's strong but not promotable. Tell her we're reviewing budget. Each phrase hit like the softest weapon, so polished it almost sounded reasonable. Lies I had believed, excuses I had accepted because they were wrapped in smiles. The city eventually thinned into silence. I drove home on instinct, headlights cutting through an empty stretch of road, every red light feeling longer than it should. When I parked outside my apartment, dawn hadn't even thought about rising. I didn't sleep, not really. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the tablet I'd borrowed. Its black screen reflected my own tired face, eyes swollen but dry. I plugged it in, watched the charge icon flicker to life, and began digging through everything I could reach: shared folders, cloud drives, backup logs, even old Teams messages synced from company servers. What I found wasn't just betrayal. It was arrogance. They hadn't even tried to hide it. Eli had used his work email to schedule private check-ins with Catherine during the exact hours I was on client calls. She approved his fast-track leadership program submission, the one he bragged about but said was just a maybe, exactly 2 weeks after she blocked mine. I scrolled deeper. Hidden inside a folder labeled Q2 Internal Recos was a single PDF. Alana review, hold until further notice. The comment section felt like a slap. Potential conflict of interest. Let's reevaluate after next cycle. Conflict of interest? I stared at the words until they stopped making sense. The hum of my refrigerator filled the silence. They had made me the conflict. I was the one staying late, fixing their missed deadlines, smoothing out client tempers. I was the one who believed extra effort could buy respect. And still, somehow, I had become the problem they needed to delay. My fingers twitched above the keyboard. The old me would have drafted an email asking for clarification. The new me pressed print. Pages rolled out slowly, the printer's hum steady like breathing. I spread them across my table, each sheet a quiet confession from their own hands. I color-coded every message, labeled each screenshot by date, time, and device. I highlighted the line showing Catherine using admin access to edit my promotion scorecard without alerting the panel. Her keystrokes had rewritten my career. By sunrise, my apartment looked like an evidence room. The coffee in my mug had gone cold, but I didn't care. I took another sip anyway because bitterness was the only flavor that matched the morning. When I finally opened my laptop, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Not HR. HR was Catherine. There was a smaller link on the company intranet, one I'd always ignored: Report Confidential Workplace Misconduct. Most people never clicked it. I did. A form appeared. At the bottom, a calendar. I booked the earliest slot available. Friday morning, 9:30 a.m., conference room B2. 30 minutes that would decide everything. That week passed like the stretch of silence before a thunderstorm. I worked. I smiled when people passed by. I nodded in meetings, but underneath, something sharp and steady had begun to form. A kind of patience I'd never known before. Friday came. I woke before dawn, showered, and dressed in the black blazer I'd bought 2 years earlier for a presentation I never got to give. My hair went up in a tight knot. Neutral lipstick, no jewelry, just quiet precision. The folder in my hand felt heavier than it should. When I reached the office, the lobby smelled of burnt espresso and carpet cleaner. People chatted in small clusters, the same meaningless chatter that had once felt normal. Today, it sounded foreign. I walked past them without slowing. Conference room B2 sat at the end of a narrow hallway near compliance. The walls there were bare, no motivational posters, no framed awards. Just gray paint and silence. Renee, the compliance officer, looked up when I entered, mid-40s maybe, sharp features softened by something that wasn't pity, just awareness. Her laptop glowed faint blue on the table. Ms. Harper? Yes. Close the door. The click of the latch sounded final. She gestured to a chair. I sat, the manila folder resting between us like a secret waiting to be spoken. Tell me what happened, she said. Her voice was calm, professional, but not cold. So I did. I told her about the archive room, the messages, the promotion delays, the manipulation so small and constant it almost passed for coincidence. I read from my notes, showed her the files, laid out each proof like stones on a path. She didn't interrupt, didn't gasp. Her pen moved occasionally, steady lines across the page. When I finished, she leaned back, studying me with eyes that seemed to weigh truth without judgment. You understand the gravity of these claims? She asked. I do. Do you want this report to remain anonymous? No. She paused. You're sure? I met her gaze. I want my name on it. A silence stretched between us. Then, slowly, a smile. Not smug, not sympathetic, just knowing. Then we'll proceed, she said. HR will not be involved until final findings. Understood? Understood. The way she said proceed made the air shift. It meant the gears had started turning, quietly but irreversibly. When I left the room, the fluorescent light in the hallway seemed brighter. My steps felt lighter too. Anger was still there, coiled somewhere inside, but beneath it was something new. Control. That afternoon, as if on cue, Eli appeared at my cubicle holding a to-go cup from the cafe on North Lamar. My usual order. Didn't see you this morning, he said. His smile was easy, practiced. Long calls? I took the coffee. It was still warm. I let the steam hit my face before answering. Something like that. He reached out, brushed my shoulder, that gentle, familiar touch he used when words might backfire. For a heartbeat, I waited to feel the old reaction, the flutter, the comfort. Nothing came. When he left, I sat for a while, staring at the cup. I could almost see the faint lipstick mark from every morning before, the pattern of routine that had blinded me. I turned it slowly, then set it down untouched. Later that day, I watched him walk toward Catherine's office. She waited by the door, tablet in hand, hair perfectly arranged like always. They laughed about something as they passed my desk. She gave me that same look, the one that said, "You'll never get where I am." I returned a different one, the kind that said, "You already fell." She didn't understand it yet. None of them did. But the wheel had already started turning. The weekend moved like fog, not the kind that rolls in heavy and gray, but the thin kind that hangs just far enough away to blur everything you try to see clearly. Time didn't feel real. The clock on my phone said hours passed, but my body didn't believe it. I didn't check emails, didn't open Teams, didn't scroll through group chats filled with fake laughter and company memes. I let every notification sit there, glowing against the screen like tiny alarms I refused to answer. Eli's messages came in waves, Friday night, then again Saturday morning. Each one arrived with a sharp buzz that made my stomach twist. I didn't read them, but I caught glimpses of the previews lighting up the corner of my phone. Everything okay? You're being weird. Are we good? The words floated there, desperate for reaction. He wanted to control the silence, to drag me back into a conversation where he could manage the narrative. I wouldn't let him. Saturday afternoon, the phone rang twice. I watched it vibrate on the counter, his name bright and familiar against the glass, like a memory I was learning to delete in real time. I waited until it stopped, then flipped it over so the screen faced down. The quiet after the ringing felt better than any explanation ever could. By Sunday, Austin had shaken off its weekday armor. The city softened. People filled the sidewalks again, couples holding iced coffees, kids with painted faces, dogs pulling at leashes. The farmer's market near the river was crowded, sunlight glinting off every jar and bottle like the world had decided to glow for everyone but me. I walked through it anyway. I didn't rush. The air smelled of basil, cut flowers, and something sugary baking in a nearby stall. A woman in a straw hat sold lavender bundles wrapped in twine. Another man played guitar, soft and out of tune. The sound didn't bother me. At one booth, an old woman with silver hair and bright blue eyes held out a tiny plastic spoon. "Strawberry jam," she said. "First batch of the season." I hesitated, then took it. It tasted sweet and simple, like something untouched by ambition or betrayal. For a moment it was just me, the sun, and the taste of something honest. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't sad anymore, not angry, just waiting, like a tide holding still before it finally comes in. Monday came too fast, but I was ready. The office looked the same. Beige walls, half-wilted plants, printers humming like restless bees. But the energy felt different to me. Every cubicle, every face, every casual laugh, it all looked rehearsed now. I could see the seams. I dressed without thinking too hard. Soft gray slacks, a white button-down, hair pulled back neatly. No lipstick, no perfume. Neutral. Invisible. I skipped breakfast with Eli, packed my own lunch, something simple. Salad, apple, water bottle. The act of preparing it felt grounding, routine rebuilt on my own terms. By 10, he showed up. He leaned against the divider of my cubicle, casual, pretending we were fine. His cologne hit first, clean, sharp, the same one that used to comfort me. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Talk to me." I looked up slowly. "About?" He frowned. The lines on his forehead deepened, concern mixed with irritation, like he wasn't used to earning someone's silence. "Are you seriously gonna do this passive thing?" he said. "If something's wrong, just say it." I tilted my head, studying him the way he used to study spreadsheets, looking for numbers that didn't add up. "Why would something be wrong?" I asked, calm as glass. He opened his mouth, paused, then closed it again. The silence between us stretched just long enough for him to realize he wasn't in control anymore. He finally shook his head, muttered something under his breath, and walked away. I watched him cross the floor toward Catherine's office. Her door was half open. I saw her look up, then smile. That slow, careful smile that always said, "I win." He stepped inside, the door shut. I didn't need to hear what was said. I already knew what was coming. Because an hour earlier, I'd received a calendar update. Company-wide compliance briefing Tuesday, 10 a.m., mandatory attendance. It was the kind of meeting that made everyone nervous. By mid-afternoon, the whispers had started. People guessed it was about budget cuts, maybe layoffs. Others said new ethics guidelines. I just kept typing, pretending to work. I already knew what it meant. Tuesday arrived colder than expected. A thin mist hung over the parking lot. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered like nervous energy. The conference room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old carpet. 25 of us filed in, shuffling chairs and clutching paper cups. The air was heavy with small talk no one cared about. Catherine stood near the projector screen, arms crossed, every strand of hair in place. Her expression was calm but tight, as if she could sense the air thinning around her. Eli sat 2 rows back, tapping his pen against his notepad, restless. I took a seat near the aisle, hands folded in my lap. My pulse was steady, my breathing slow. Then the door opened. Renee stepped in first, followed by a tall man in a blue blazer who looked like he'd stepped out of a compliance handbook. Straight posture, unreadable face. The room shifted immediately. The sound of pens clicking stopped. Conversations cut mid-sentence. Renee's voice was calm. "Before we begin, I need to speak with 2 employees, Catherine Moore and Eli Renner. Every head turned. Catherine's jaw tightened just for a second. Eli blinked twice like he'd misheard. Neither of them moved. "Now, please," Renee said. The words dropped like stones. The room went silent except for the hum of the projector fan. Catherine smoothed her blouse, pretending composure. "Of course," she said, almost breezy, but her hand trembled as she picked up her tablet. Eli stood slower. His pen rolled off the table and hit the floor. No one bent to pick it up. They followed Renee out into the hallway. The man in the blazer held the door until it clicked shut behind them. No one spoke for several seconds. Then someone coughed. A chair creaked. Renee turned back to the rest of us. "We'll reschedule this session, thank you." That was it. No explanation, no drama. Just the quiet efficiency of consequences finally catching up. She left. The door shut again, and there we sat, 25 employees and me, frozen in the kind of silence that hums louder than sound. I didn't move. My hands rested neatly on my lap. My face was calm, neutral. Inside, something like relief unfurled, slow and quiet. No one said my name. No one asked questions, but 3 people glanced my way. Brief, cautious looks that lingered a little too long. By afternoon, Eli didn't come back, neither did Catherine. Their offices stayed dark. Emails started circulating about temporary reassignment and pending review, written in careful corporate language that said everything without saying anything. My inbox stayed empty until late evening when a single new message appeared. Subject: follow-up, promotion review. I opened it slowly, half expecting another delay, another excuse. It wasn't that. Inside was a single line. "We'd like to revisit your eligibility for advancement. No apology. No explanation. Just a door, quietly opening." I sat there for a long time, staring at the words until they blurred. The hum of the office surrounded me again. Phones ringing, printers clicking, conversations picking up like nothing had happened. But something had. It wasn't the promotion. It wasn't even justice. It was the sound of balance returning, the first ripple of accountability touching people who thought they were untouchable. I closed the email, logged off. When I stepped outside, the sky had turned gold around the edges, the kind of light that made everything look softer, even glass buildings. The wind carried the faint scent of rain and cut grass. For the first time in months, I felt taller. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped shrinking. The office felt quieter after they left, not in the literal sense. Printers still whirred, phones still rang, chairs still creaked against the linoleum floor. But something deeper had shifted. The noise no longer carried weight. It no longer echoed with the same tension. It was like someone had cracked open a window and all the poison had finally slipped out into the open air. The space itself seemed to breathe again. Even the air conditioning hummed softer, as if the building, too, was relieved. Eli didn't message me after that day. No calls, no texts, no attempts at explanation or closure. Nothing. And I wasn't surprised. He was never built for aftermaths. He thrived in control, in carefully arranged conversations, in moments where he dictated the pace, the tone, the next move. But now, the narrative had escaped his hands. And a man like him doesn't fight a battle he can't manipulate. He walks away from it, pretending it never existed. Catherine, though, she tried. Thursday morning, she came back, briefly. I was in the break room waiting for the Keurig to finish sputtering out half a cup of coffee when I heard her voice. It carried differently now, thin, strained, missing its usual gloss of confidence. When she appeared, she looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. Her gray pantsuit was sharp, but too stiff, like she'd ironed it out of fear instead of pride. Her hair, usually styled with effortless waves, was pulled back so tightly it looked painful. "Morning," she said to no one in particular, her tone light but empty. People nodded back, polite but distant. Conversations paused when she walked by and resumed as soon as she passed. She made a slow loop around the office, clipboard in hand, pretending to check something on her screen. It was the kind of movement that said, I still belong here, even when everyone knew she didn't. When she reached my end of the floor, our eyes met. For a moment, the air between us went still. Her gaze flickered, just once, not long enough for anyone else to notice. But I saw it, the recognition, the fear, the unspoken understanding that she wasn't the one holding the power anymore. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking too fast against the floor, like she couldn't get out of that space quickly enough. That afternoon, an all-staff memo went out. Effective immediately, Catherine Moore is on administrative leave pending internal review. Any HR concerns should be directed to the interim coordinator. It was written in neutral language, the corporate kind designed to say everything and nothing at once. But we all knew. She wouldn't be back. No one said it aloud, but relief hummed quietly through the building, disguised as normal workday chatter. Later that same day, I saw a new notification in my inbox. Meeting request, Johnson, Friday, 8:45 a.m. No subject line, just one word, discussion. I stared at it for a long time, not anxious, not excited, just aware that it was the next inevitable step in a story I hadn't planned to tell, but had ended up living. Friday morning came soft and overcast. I chose navy, simple, steady, hair down, no makeup except a touch of lip balm. I didn't dress for them anymore. I dressed for clarity. The elevator ride to the 10th floor was silent. My reflection in the brushed metal doors looked calm, detached, like someone who'd already accepted both victory and loss as two sides of the same coin. Johnson's office smelled faintly of leather and old coffee. The blinds were half open, letting in stripes of pale light that cut across the carpet. He was seated behind his desk, reading something on his laptop when I entered. He didn't ask me to sit right away, just looked up, his expression unreadable but softer than usual. "Alana," he said, finally closing the screen. "I'll keep this brief." I nodded, waiting. "We've reviewed your performance evaluations, client feedback, and overall contributions to the firm." His tone was formal, but there was a current beneath it, something heavier, almost regretful. "Okay," I said quietly. He leaned back, exhaled, then continued. "There were discrepancies in how your file was handled. That's being addressed separately." He paused, folding his hands. "For now, I want to offer you the project lead position. Effective next quarter. Full compensation. Adjustment included." I didn't respond right away, not because I was stunned, but because I wasn't. I'd known this was coming. The pieces had already started falling into place long before this meeting. Johnson glanced up again, meeting my eyes. It should have happened sooner. That sentence landed harder than any promotion could. I nodded once. "Thank you." He gestured toward a folder on his desk. "There's a formal letter you can review. HR will, well, our interim contact will walk you through it." I stepped forward, took the folder. My fingers brushed the smooth manila surface that, for years, I'd watched hold everyone else's progress but mine. Before leaving, I paused. "Just so I'm clear," I said, voice steady. "Did Catherine recommend Eli for that role before this review?" He hesitated, caught off guard. "She did." "And his credentials?" Another pause, longer this time. "They didn't meet the threshold," he admitted. I nodded again, once. "That's what I thought." I turned and left. The hallway outside looked the same as always, white walls, framed certificates, fluorescent hum. But the light felt different now. Not brighter, just less fake. As if the tint of politics had finally been washed off the walls, leaving only daylight behind. In the elevator, my reflection stared back at me. My posture straight, my face calm. Not the woman who once stayed late for other people's deadlines. Not the girlfriend who dimmed herself so someone else could shine. Just me, steady, visible, unbent. At lunch, a junior analyst I barely knew approached me by the vending machine. She looked nervous, her hands twisting around a granola bar wrapper. "Hey," she said softly. "I don't mean to pry, but did you really file a report?" I looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I did." She bit her lip. "Was it scary?" "Terrifying," I said. She hesitated, then smiled. A small, genuine curve of her lips. Thank you. I watched her walk away, her shoulders a little straighter than before. That tiny exchange, those 2 words, felt heavier than the promotion letter in my hand. That night, I went home, kicked off my heels, and poured a glass of wine. The city hummed outside my balcony, traffic weaving along I-35, headlights cutting across the dark like quiet intentions. I didn't call anyone, didn't post about it, didn't even celebrate. I just sat there, the glass cool against my palm, the air warm against my skin. The kind of silence that wasn't empty but full, alive with everything that had led here. Somewhere, in a forgotten archive room 2 floors below, the dust still clung to old cardboard boxes. The bulb still flickered, struggling between life and death. That room was where I first saw the truth, the place where the version of me that accepted injustice quietly had finally disappeared. Now, my name was on the door they tried to lock me out of, and every time I walked past that archive room, I didn't look away. I just smiled. The next Monday came with sunlight slanting across my desk like a quiet crown. The morning air inside the building felt softer somehow. Not silent. Keyboards still clicked, printers still coughed, phones still rang. But the tension that used to hang in the corners had dissolved. The usual Monday murmur sounded lighter, as if the walls had finally exhaled. People looked at me differently, not with fear, not pity, something closer to recognition, respect, maybe. A quiet acknowledgement that I was still here, still standing, that the fog that had blurred my name in every meeting, every review, every whispered conversation, was gone. Eli's desk sat empty, his coffee mug still there, ringed with a faint stain, the monitor dark, the chair slightly off-center, as though he'd stood up fast and never came back. He hadn't been in since the compliance call-out. Rumor spread quietly. He's on leave pending review. No one said more. No one asked questions. No one missed him out loud. The absence was self-explanatory. It was strange how quickly people adjusted to a vacancy. At 9:32 a.m., an envelope appeared on my desk. Interoffice mail, cream-colored, stamped with a small red seal from compliance. Inside, my official promotion packet. Signed, notarized, stamped. And not by HR. That part mattered more than the title itself. I sat there for a long time, the weight of the papers warm against my palms. The office around me hummed with its usual rhythm, phones, keyboards, chatter. But none of it touched me. All I could hear were memories. Catherine's laugh, sharp and rehearsed, echoing from behind closed doors. Eli's smirk under dim desk light, his voice curling around lies disguised as reassurance. The stillness in those rooms when I asked, "What happened to my submission?" The sound of silence pretending to be an answer. I remembered how easily they'd made me doubt myself, how they turned competence into arrogance, confidence into attitude, how every maybe next quarter was really a no they didn't have the courage to say. But I had outlived their almosts. By mid-afternoon, I'd stopped rereading the letter. I slipped it into my drawer and went back to work. Emails, projections, deliverables. Simple, tangible things. At 2:10 p.m., there was a company-wide meeting. Quarterly projections. Another slideshow of numbers and buzzwords. Usually, I dreaded these. An endless dance of jargon meant to keep people nodding without noticing how little was actually being said. But that day, I sat in the front row. Not to be seen. To see clearly. The conference room buzzed with the faint static of overhead lights and cheap speakers. The interim HR rep stood at the podium, her posture straight but voice measured. "Before we begin," she said, "we'd like to acknowledge a recent leadership." Transition! Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Pages stopped turning. She smiled, not at the room, but slightly toward me. "Effective immediately, Alana Harper will serve as the new project lead for North Region accounts." It took a second for the words to land. Then came the reaction. Scattered claps, a few smiles, others just blinking in surprise. The sound wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. I didn't stand. I didn't wave. I didn't perform gratitude for something I'd already earned. Catherine's chair, still empty in the back row, said everything that applause couldn't. After the meeting, I packed my notes and left quietly. My steps led me down a hallway I hadn't walked in weeks, toward the archive room. I didn't plan it. It just happened, like muscle memory guiding me back to the place where everything began. The metal handle felt colder than I remembered. The door creaked open, slow, resisting at first. The air inside was the same: dust, old paper, stale ink, but lighter somehow. The light flickered above, but softer, less menacing. I stepped inside. The shelves were still lined with years of forgotten files, yellowed labels curling at the edges. The scanner sat in the same corner, quiet, harmless. I ran my fingers across its surface, remembering that morning. The blue glow on Eli's tablet, the buzz of the bulb, the way my pulse had outpaced my breath. The moment everything I'd ignored came into focus, I looked toward the corner where he had stood, grinning at his phone, oblivious to what was about to unravel. I exhaled. The air felt clean. I whispered, almost without meaning to. They hid their messages in the archive room, so I stored their consequences in the company. The words weren't bitter. They were a statement of balance. I turned to leave, but before closing the door, I paused. The light above buzzed faintly, struggling between bright and dim. I left it on. Let it buzz, let it flicker. Because not every ghost needs to be erased. Some deserve to linger, to see what happens when the lights finally stay on. When I walked back to my desk, the afternoon sun poured across the office floor, painting long gold lines across every surface. Emails pinged, conversations drifted. Life resumed its steady rhythm. But somewhere inside that rhythm, I felt something new. Peace, not triumph. Clarity, not revenge. The kind of calm that comes when the truth finally sits in the open and doesn't need to shout anymore. And as I looked around the office, at the people typing, laughing, living their small moments, I realized something simple but final. Justice doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it walks in quietly, sits down, and stays. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.